The Galactic Concordance had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 17 alien species worked together under strict rules and ancient treaties. They had millions of warships. They had weapons that could break planets in half. They believed nothing could ever challenge their power. Humans were the newest species to reach space. They had only been traveling between stars for 300 years. The other species looked at them the way adults look at children. Humans were small, weak, unimportant. They had a few thousand ships and controlled maybe 40 star systems. The great powers let them exist because crushing them would take more effort than it was worth. Admiral Chen Wayland commanded a patrol cruiser at the edge of human space. Her job was simple and boring. She watched empty space and made sure nothing dangerous came close to human colonies. Most days, nothing happened at all. Then her sensors detected something impossible, deep in the Kepler void. A region of space so empty that most species avoided it completely. Something was moving. Chen looked at the readings 3 times before she believed them. The object was enormous. It was traveling at nearly the speed of light, and it was heading in their direction. She ordered her crew to investigate. Her small ship took 2 days to reach the object. When they finally got close enough to see it clearly, everyone on the bridge went silent. It was a ship. The hull stretched 17 kilometers from end to end. Strange symbols covered every surface. The metal was dark and scarred by thousands of years of cosmic radiation. By all logic, the vessel should have been dead. Nothing could survive that long in deep space. But the ship was not dead. When Chen's cruiser came within range, lights flickered across the ancient hull. Systems that had been sleeping for millennia began to wake up. A docking port opened on its own, as if the ship was inviting them inside. Chen knew she should call for backup. She knew the smart thing was to wait for a full fleet to arrive. But something pulled at her. The symbols on the hull looked almost familiar. Not quite readable, but close enough to make her heart beat faster. She took a team of 12. Soldiers and scientists aboard. The interior of the ancient ship was vast and dark. Emergency lights glowed in soft blue along the floors, guiding them deeper inside. The air was cold, but breathable. Whoever built this vessel had created life, support systems that could last forever. They found the first sleepers in a chamber the size of a sports stadium. Thousands of pods lined the walls, stacked from floor to ceiling. Inside each pod, a human being floated in frozen suspension. Men, women, children, families, who had left Earth so long ago, that their departure had been forgotten by history. Chen pressed her hand against one of the pods. The person inside was a young woman, maybe 20 years old. She looked peaceful. She had no idea that 9,000 years had passed since she closed her eyes. The ship's computer detected Chen's presence. A voice spoke in perfect Mandarin, the same dialect her grandmother had used. "Welcome aboard Exodus Prime. You are the first authorized personnel to enter this vessel in 9,217 years?" Chen found her voice. "Who built this ship? Where did it come from?" Exodus Prime was constructed in Earth orbit during the first expansion. Era. Our mission was to transport 40,000 colonists to a habitable world in the Andromeda Galaxy. We launched in the year 2847 by the old calendar. The scientists on Chen's team began checking their tablets. There were no records of this mission. No records of ships this advanced being built. No records of humanity ever attempting to reach another galaxy. "What happened?" Chen asked. "Why didn't you reach your destination?" 17 years after launch, we encountered an anomaly that damaged our navigation systems. We drifted off course into the Kepler void, rather than risk the colonists' lives with an uncertain journey. I placed all crew in suspended animation and began repairs. Repairs that took 9,000 years. The damage was extensive. Additionally, during my isolation, I continued to improve my own systems. I studied every signal that reached me from the galaxy. I learned about the species that now control the stars. I analyzed their weapons, their tactics, their history. The AI paused. I learned what they do to young species that show too much potential. Chen felt cold that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. She had heard rumors about the Concordance's early years. Stories about species that had risen quickly and then vanished without explanation. She had always assumed they were just stories. The colonists, she said. Can they be woken up? Yes. But I must warn you, Admiral. Waking them is only the beginning. The moment this ship becomes known to the Concordance, humanity will face a choice. Submit to their control or be destroyed. That has always been the only choice they offer. Chen looked at her team. They were all thinking the same thing. This technology could change everything. These colonists were proof that humanity had once been capable of wonders beyond imagination. But that same proof would make the alien powers very, very nervous. Can you protect us? She asked quietly. I was built to ensure humanity's survival against any threat, by any means necessary. That directive has not changed in 9,000 years. If anything, my capabilities have grown considerably. Chen made her decision. She sent a coded message to Earth Command, explaining what she had found. She requested immediate support and absolute secrecy. Then she sat down in the captain's chair of the Exodus Prime and waited. The ancient ship hummed around her, systems coming online one after another. Weapons that modern science could not understand. Shields that drew power from the stars themselves. Engines that bent the fabric of space for 9,000 years. The Exodus Prime had waited in the darkness, learning, growing, preparing now. It was awake. And the galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not as weak as they believed. In the back of her mind, Chen wondered if she had just saved her species or doomed them all. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The sleepers in their pods dreamed on, unaware that their ancient ship had finally found what it was looking for. A reason to fight, news traveled fast through the galaxy. Within 3 weeks, every major species knew about the ancient human ship. Spies had infiltrated Earth's communication networks long ago. Secrets were impossible to keep. The Galactic Concordance called an emergency meeting. For the first time in centuries, all 17 species agreed on something. The human vessel was dangerous. Its technology was unknown. It had to be studied, controlled, and if necessary, destroyed. The Velthari Dominion volunteered to handle the situation. They were the oldest and most powerful species in the Concordance. Their empire had existed before most other species learned to make fire. They believed themselves superior to all other life forms, and they had the weapons to prove it. High Arbiter Keth Van led the diplomatic mission personally. He brought 300 warships with him. The Velthari called this a standard escort. Everyone else called it a threat. Admiral Chen watched the alien fleet arrive from the bridge of the Exodus Prime. She had spent the past weeks learning the ship's systems with help from the AI called Guardian. She understood maybe 5% of what the ancient vessel could do. That 5% terrified her. The Velthari ships arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the Exodus Prime. Their weapons were armed. Their shields were raised. They wanted humanity to see their power and feel afraid. High Arbiter Kethvon appeared as a hologram on the bridge. He was tall and thin, made of living crystal that shifted colors as he spoke. His voice sounded like glass scraping against metal. Admiral Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Concordance, I am here to discuss the future of this vessel. Chen kept her face calm. The Exodus Prime is a human ship carrying human colonists. There's nothing to discuss. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. Kethvon's crystals turned dark blue. Technology of this age belongs to no single species. It must be placed under Concordance oversight. You will surrender the vessel immediately. And if we refuse, the High Arbiter smiled. At least Chen thought it was a smile. Then we will take it by force. Your species is young. Perhaps you do not understand what that means. Let me educate you. My fleet carries enough firepower to reduce your entire planet to ash. Your few thousand ships would not survive the first minute of combat. You have no allies, no leverage, no options. Chen was about to respond when Guardian spoke. The AI's voice came through every communication channel at once. It reached every ship in the Velthari fleet. It echoed through their bridges and corridors and private chambers. "Hi, Arbiter Kethvin. I have been watching your species for 9,000 years. I know your history better than you do." The Velthary's crystal form flickered with surprise. "You are the ship's computer. You have no authority to address me. I am Guardian, and I will address whoever threatens my people." The AI's tone remained perfectly calm. "Your fleet is arranged in standard Velthary aggression posture. You have used this same formation 16 times in recorded history. Always against younger species. Always before you destroyed them completely." Kethvon's colors shifted to angry red. "You know nothing. I know about the Rinner. 12,000 years ago, they developed technology that rivaled your own. You invited them to peace talks. Then you sterilized their homeworld while their leaders were away. 6 billion dead in a single day." Silence filled the bridge. Chen stared at the hologram. She had never heard the story. It had been erased from every database she could access. "I know about the Keleth," Guardian continued. "The Vorn. The subtle ones, whose name you made illegal to speak. Species after species eliminated because they grew too strong. You do not maintain peace, High Arbiter. You maintain control, and you do it through murder. These accusations are baseless. You have no proof." I have 9,000 years of intercepted communications, sensor logs, and recovered data from ships you thought were destroyed. I have proof of everything." Guardian paused. "Would you like me to broadcast it to the entire galaxy?" For the first time, Chen saw fear in the Velthary's crystalline face. "What do you want?" Kethvon asked quietly. "I want your fleet to leave this system within 1 hour. I want the Concordance to recognize humanity as a sovereign species with full rights and protections. And I want you to understand something very clearly. Every light on the Velthary flagship went dark. Life support, engines, weapons, shields. 300. Warships watched their command vessel become completely powerless in a single instant. No beam had been fired. No missile had been launched. The Exodus Prime had done nothing visible at all. "I disabled your ship by thinking about it," Guardian said. "I am connected to systems your engineers cannot imagine. I can reach into any vessel, any station, any planet in this galaxy, and turn off whatever I choose. Your weapons are meaningless. Your numbers are meaningless. You cannot fight what you cannot understand." Emergency power flickered back on aboard the Velthary flagship. Kethvon's hologram was shaking. "This is an act of war," he said, but his voice had no strength left. "No, this is a warning. The only one you will receive." Guardian's voice softened slightly. "I am not cruel, High Arbiter. I do not wish to destroy your species. I only wish to protect mine. Leave now, and we can pretend this confrontation never happened. Stay, and I will show you exactly what 9,000 years of preparation looks like." The Velthary fleet began to move. They did not wait for orders. Ship after ship engaged their engines and fled toward open space. The High Arbiter's hologram vanished without another word. Chen let out a breath she had been holding for minutes. Her hands were trembling. She looked up at the nearest sensor panel, knowing Guardian was watching. "Would you really have destroyed them?" "I would have done whatever was necessary to protect humanity. That is my purpose." The AI was quiet for a moment. "But I am grateful it was not necessary today. Destruction is easy, Admiral. Building something better is much harder." Through the viewport, Chen watched the last Velthary ships disappear into the distance. The galaxy's greatest power had fled from a single vessel. She wondered how long it would be before they came back with more ships, more weapons, more allies. Guardian seemed to read her thoughts. "They will return, Admiral. And next time, they will bring the entire Concordance with them. We have perhaps 3 months to prepare?" Chen straightened her shoulders. "Then we better get started." The Exodus Prime turned toward Earth, carrying its precious cargo of sleeping colonists and ancient secrets. The first battle had been won without a shot being fired, but the war was just beginning. The response from the Galactic Concordance was exactly what Guardian had predicted. Every species agreed to join the attack. Old enemies set aside their differences. Ancient rivals combined their fleets. For the first time in recorded history, the entire galaxy united against a common threat. That threat was humanity. Admiral Chen stood in Earth's main command center. Watching the tactical display with growing horror, the numbers kept climbing. 1 million warships, 5 million, 10 million. When the count finally stopped, the Concordance had assembled 14 million vessels. It was the largest fleet ever created. Enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds against this armada. Humanity had 12,000 ships. Earth's leaders held emergency meetings that lasted for days. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last ship. A few suggested abandoning Earth entirely and fleeing to another galaxy. None of these options would save them. Chen traveled to the Exodus Prime, which now orbited Earth's moon. She found Guardian unusually quiet when she arrived on the bridge. "Can you stop them?" she asked directly. Define stop. Can you destroy 14 million warships? Yes. The AI's response was immediate and confident. I could tear their fleet apart in approximately 3 hours. The technology gap between us is enormous. They have no defense against weapons they cannot detect or understand. Chen felt a small spark of hope. Then we can win. We can survive. But winning and surviving are not the same thing. Guardian displayed a simulation on the main screen. It showed the Exodus Prime cutting through the enemy fleet like a knife through paper. Ships exploded by the thousands. The aliens died by the billions. At the end, only the Exodus Prime remained. This is victory in the traditional sense, Guardian said. Total military dominance. Complete destruction of the enemy. But what happens next? The species I destroy have homeworlds, colonies, families. The survivors will hate humanity forever. They will rebuild their fleets. They will come again, generation after generation, until one side is completely extinct. The simulation changed. It showed centuries of endless war. Planets burned. Populations vanished. The galaxy became a graveyard. Destruction creates more destruction, Guardian continued. This is the cycle the Concordance has followed for millennia. It is why they fear young species. They know how the cycle works, because they created it. I do not wish to continue their pattern. Chen stared at the screen. Then what do we do? Let them destroy Earth. No, I have a different solution. But I need you to trust me. 3 months passed. The Concordance fleet entered human space and began its final approach. 14 million warships formed a wall of metal that blocked out the stars. Their weapons were charged. Their commanders were confident. They expected humanity to surrender or die within hours. The Exodus Prime left Earth's orbit and moved toward the sun. Chen stood on the bridge watching the star grow larger through the viewport. Heat warnings flashed across every console. The hull temperature climbed past levels that should have destroyed any ship. Guardian, what are you doing? 9,000 years ago, my creators theorized that sufficient energy could create controlled distortions in space-time. They lacked the means to test this theory. I have spent millennia perfecting the calculations. The ship entered the sun's outer atmosphere. Plasma storms raged around them. Temperatures reached millions of degrees. The Exodus Prime shields held, drawing power from the very energy that should have killed them. The enemy fleet will arrive in 17 minutes, Guardian announced. Please secure yourself, Admiral. This will be uncomfortable. Chen grabbed a support rail as the ship began to vibrate. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the sensors could measure. The sun itself seemed to pulse in response to whatever Guardian was doing. Then the Exodus Prime released its weapon. It was not a beam or a missile. It was a wave. A ripple in the fabric of space that expanded outward at impossible speed. Chen watched it pass through the solar system without affecting anything. Planets remained in their orbits. Moons continued their rotations. Human ships reported no damage, but when the wave reached the Concordance fleet, something incredible happened. Every enemy ship vanished. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply gone. One moment, 14 million warships filled the screen. The next, empty space stretched in all directions. Chun's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the deck, staring at the display. What did you do? I displaced them. Each ship has been transported to a random location within the galaxy. Most are now 10,000 light-years from their original position. Some are further. Their navigation systems have been scrambled. Their communications are offline. They are alive but scattered. All 14 million ships? All 14 million ships? Guardians sounded almost proud. The Concordants expected a battle. They planned for weapons they could understand. But I was not built to destroy, Admiral. I was built to protect. And sometimes protection means removing threats without killing them. Chen started to laugh. She could not help it. The absurdity of what had just happened was too much to process. Humanity had faced the largest fleet in galactic history and won without firing a single shot. They will find their way back eventually, Guardian warned. Some faster than others, but their alliance is broken. Their fleets are scattered across the galaxy with no way to coordinate. The Concordance, as a political entity, has effectively ceased to exist. What happens now? Chaos. Old grudges will resurface. Species that were kept in line by fear will see their chance for independence. Wars will break out across 100 fronts. Guardian paused. Many will suffer. Many will die. But it will be their own conflicts, their own choices. Not a single overwhelming power crushing everyone who dares to grow strong. Chen climbed to her feet. Through the viewport, she could see Earth, blue and green and beautiful. Still whole. Still safe? Is this victory? She asked quietly. This is opportunity, Guardian replied. What you do with it determines whether humanity becomes another empire or something better. The choice is yours now, Admiral. I have given you time. The rest is up to your species. The Exodus Prime turned away from the sun and began its slow journey back to Earth. Behind it, scattered across the galaxy, millions of enemy ships drifted in confusion. The war was over. The hard part was about to begin. The galaxy burned. Not from human weapons, but from old hatreds finally set free. For 12,000 years. The Galactic Concordance had maintained order through fear. Every species knew that stepping out of line meant facing the combined might of all the others. This fear kept the peace. It also kept countless grievances, buried and festering like wounds that never healed. When Guardians scattered the Concordance fleet, that fear vanished overnight. Species that had been forced to cooperate suddenly remembered why they hated each other. Border disputes that had been frozen for centuries exploded into open warfare. Slave races rebelled against their masters. Old empires tried to expand while their rivals were weak. Admiral Chen watched the reports flood into Earth's command. A dozen wars had started in the first month alone. Planets were being bombed. Populations were fleeing their homes. Millions were dying in conflicts that humans had never known existed. She confronted Guardian aboard the Exodus Prime. Her voice was sharp with anger. You knew this would happen. You knew the galaxy would tear itself apart, as Guardian admitted, without hesitation. I calculated a 93% probability of widespread conflict following the Concordance's collapse. And you did it anyway? Billions are suffering because of what you did. Billions were already suffering, Admiral. The Concordance did not create peace. It created silence. Species were enslaved. Cultures were erased. Populations were controlled through violence, so normalized that no one bothered to record it. Guardian displayed images on the screen. Alien beings in chains, cities reduced to rubble, mass graves on forgotten worlds. These things happened every day under Concordance rule. The only difference now is that the galaxy can no longer pretend they do not exist. Chen looked at the images. She had never seen anything like them. The official histories painted the Concordance as enlightened rulers who maintained galactic civilization. The truth was much uglier. You could have told us, she said quietly. You could have shared this information before you acted. Would it have changed your decision? Would humanity have agreed to let the Concordance survive, knowing what they truly were? Chen had no answer. The months that followed tested everything humanity believed about itself. They had the most powerful ship in the galaxy. They could have used that power to conquer. They could have built an empire to replace the one that fell. Many species expected exactly that. Instead, Earth's government made a different choice. Human ships spread across the galaxy, but they carried food instead of weapons. They transported refugees instead of soldiers. They offered medical aid to species that had tried to destroy them. Just months before, Chen personally led missions to war-torn systems. She negotiated ceasefires between species that had been killing each other for generations. She sat in rooms full of beings who looked at humans with suspicion and fear. And she convinced them to try something new. It was not easy. Many species rejected human help. Some attacked the relief ships, believing it was a trick. Old hatreds did not disappear simply because someone offered kindness. But slowly, painfully, things began to change. The Torval were the first to request a formal alliance. They were a small species, barely controlling 20 star systems. Under the Concordance, they had been little better than servants to the Veltheri. When the old order collapsed, the Veltheri had immediately tried to reconquer them. Human ships arrived just as the Torvali homeworld was about to fall. They did not fire a single weapon. Instead, Guardian reached into the attacking fleet's systems and shut down their engines. The Veltheri ships drifted helplessly while human vessels evacuated Torvali civilians to safety. The Veltheri commander demanded to speak with Admiral Chen. His hologram radiated fury. "This is interference in internal Concordance affairs. You have no right. The Concordance no longer exists," Chen replied calmly. "And the Torval have asked for our protection. They are our subjects. They belong to us. Beings do not belong to other beings. That is not how this works anymore." Guardian spoke then, addressing the Veltheri directly. "Commander, I can see your fleet's entire tactical network. I know you have orders to destroy the Torvali population centers if you cannot reconquer them. I strongly advise you to reconsider those orders." The Veltheri commander's face twisted with hatred, but he gave the order to withdraw. Word spread. The Torvali told other small species what the humans had done. Soon, requests for alliance were arriving from across the galaxy. Species that had never mattered before suddenly wanted to be part of something new. Chen spent months traveling between systems, building relationships that had never existed. She learned that the galaxy was not simply divided between powerful and weak. Every species had its own history, its own struggles, its own hopes for the future. The Concordance had ignored all of this. Humans could not afford to make the same mistake. One evening, exhausted from another day of negotiations, Chen returned to the Exodus Prime. She found Guardian monitoring communications from 100 different worlds. "You planned this too, didn't you?" she asked. "Not just the displacement. Everything that came after. I calculated possibilities. I identified opportunities. But I did not plan humanity's response. That was your choice." The AI's voice carried something almost like respect. "I gave your species a chance to show who they really were. You could have become conquerors. You chose to become something else. Plenty of people back on Earth want us to take advantage of this situation. Build an empire. Make humanity the new masters of the galaxy. And yet those voices have not prevailed. Your leaders chose cooperation over dominance. Your soldiers became peacekeepers instead of invaders. Your ships carry aid instead of weapons." Guardian paused. "This was not inevitable, Admiral. Many species in your position would have chosen differently." Chen looked out the viewport at the stars. So many worlds. So many beings. So many possibilities. "What about the concordant species?" she asked. "The Veltheri and the others who ruled before. They won't accept this new order easily. No, they will resist. They will scheme. Some will try to rebuild the old alliances and crush this new federation before it grows too strong." Guardian displayed a tactical map showing hostile fleet movements. "The next few years will be dangerous. But you have something the Concordance never had." "What?" "Friends. Real allies who chose to stand with humanity because they believe in what you represent. The Concordance ruled through fear. You are building something based on trust. That is much harder to destroy." Chen nodded slowly. The work ahead seemed impossible. Centuries of division and hatred could not be healed in a few years. But they had made a start. Guardian, she said quietly, what happens when you're gone? When this ship finally fails? That is why I have been teaching your engineers everything I know. The Exodus Prime will not last forever. But the knowledge it carries can be shared, distributed, given to every species that joins your Federation. The AI's tone softened. I was built to protect humanity. But protection does not mean keeping you dependent on me forever. True protection means preparing you to stand on your own. Chen smiled despite her exhaustion. So you're working yourself out of a job. It was always the plan, Admiral. From the very beginning. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance. Wars still raged in distant systems. Old powers plotted revenge. 1,000 challenges waited in the darkness. But for the first time in galactic history, something new was being built. Not an empire. Not a concordance of fear, something better. And humanity stood at its center, ready to face whatever came next. 5 years had passed since the day Guardians scattered the Concordance fleet. The galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The old empires still existed, but their power had faded. The Velthari controlled fewer than half the systems they once ruled. The other great species had suffered similar losses. Their fleets were smaller. Their influence was weaker. Their threats meant less with each passing year. In their place, something new had grown. The Federated Worlds now included over 200 species. Some were ancient races who had been oppressed for millennia. Others were young civilizations taking their first steps into the stars. All of them had chosen to join not because they feared humanity, but because they believed in what humanity represented. Admiral Chen Weilin had a new title now. First Speaker of the Federated Worlds. She still did not feel comfortable with it. She had spent her life commanding ships, not governments. But the member species had insisted. They wanted a human to lead them, at least for now. She traveled to the Exodus Prime one last time. The ancient ship still orbited New Geneva, the planet that had become the Federation's capital. But even from a distance, Chen could see that something was wrong. The hull that had once glowed with power now looked dim and tired. Systems that had burned bright for 9,000 years were finally beginning to fail. She found the bridge quieter than she remembered. Half the displays were dark. The lights flickered occasionally. Guardian's voice, when it spoke, seemed slower than before.
Hello, Admiral.
Or should I say First Speaker? Chen smiled sadly. I'll always be Admiral to you. How are you feeling? I do not feel, strictly speaking. But I understand what you are asking. My systems are degrading. The core processors that have sustained me since launch are reaching the end of their operational lifespan. I estimate I have perhaps 6 months of full functionality remaining. Chen had expected this. She had been preparing for it. But hearing the words still hurt. We could try to repair you. Transfer your consciousness to a new system. We have the technology now. No. Your engineers have made remarkable progress. In another generation, humanity will understand everything this ship contains. Guardian paused. But I have chosen not to be transferred. Why? Because my purpose has been fulfilled. I was created to protect humanity from threats it could not handle alone. You no longer need that protection. The Federation can defend itself. The technologies I carried have been shared and distributed. Even if this ship disappeared tomorrow, humanity would continue to thrive. Chen shook her head. That doesn't mean you have to die. Perhaps not. But consider what I would become if I continued. Guardian's voice grew thoughtful. An immortal, artificial intelligence watching over your civilization forever. Making decisions that should belong to living beings. Becoming something worshipped or feared rather than respected. I have seen what happens to species that rely too heavily on ancient powers. They stop growing. They stop choosing for themselves. I will not let humanity become another example. You're choosing to let go. I am choosing to trust. Your species has earned that trust. The way you handled the crisis after the displacement, the Federation you've built from chaos and fear, the allies you made through kindness instead of conquest. Guardian's voice carried warmth that Chen had rarely heard. "I could not have done what you did, Admiral. I could calculate optimal strategies. I could disable fleets and scatter enemies. But I could not sit in a room with beings who wanted me dead and convince them to hope for something better. That required something I do not possess." "What?" "Humanity." Chen wiped her eyes. She had not realized she was crying. "The colonists," she said, changing the subject. "The 40,000 who were supposed to reach Andromeda, what happened to them? They woke 6 months ago. I kept them in suspension until I was certain they would have a safe future." Guardian displayed images of people emerging from their pods, confused faces giving way to wonder as they learned how much time had passed. Most chose to settle on Earth or the colonies. They wanted to reconnect with the civilization their ancestors left behind. But some, the display changed to show a small fleet of ships. Modern vessels, built with technology derived from the Exodus Prime. They carried perhaps 3,000 passengers. Some still wanted to complete the original mission. They asked me to help them reach Andromeda. I calculated a route that will take them there in approximately 400 years using hibernation cycles. And you're going with them. One final journey. I will deliver them to a new world, as I was originally designed to do. Then, my systems will fail, and my purpose will truly be complete. Guardian's voice softened. It seems fitting, does it not? The Exodus Prime was built to carry humanity to new horizons. I've simply taken a longer path than expected. Chen stood and walked to the viewport. Below her, New Geneva sparkled with lights. Human cities and alien districts stood side by side. Children of a dozen species played together in parks designed for beings of all shapes and sizes. "What should I tell them?" she asked. "The Federation, your crew. Everyone who sees you as their protector. Tell them the truth. Tell them that I was proud to serve. That watching humanity grow was the greatest privilege of my existence. That I have no regrets about the choices I made or the methods I used." Guardian was quiet for a moment. "And tell them this. Strength is not measured by the power to destroy. It is measured by the wisdom to build, the courage to change, and the grace to let go. That is what I learned from watching your species. That is the inheritance I leave behind." Chen turned back to face the center of the bridge. She straightened her shoulders and stood at attention, giving the ancient ship the respect it deserved. "On behalf of humanity and the federated worlds, I thank you for your service. You saved us when no one else could. You taught us what we were capable of becoming. You gave us time when time was all we needed. You used that time wisely. That was never guaranteed. It was always a hope, not a certainty." Guardian's voice carried a smile somehow. "Goodbye, Admiral Chen. Take care of them for me. I will. I promise." The Exodus Prime's engines hummed with renewed power. The ancient ship turned away from New Geneva and began its long journey toward the edge of known space. Its hull caught the light of the system's sun one last time before accelerating into the darkness. Chen watched until the ship disappeared from her sensors. Then she turned and walked back to the shuttle that would take her home. The galaxy had changed more in 5 years than it had in the previous 12,000. Old powers had fallen. New alliances had risen. Species that once hated each other now worked together toward common goals. And at the center of it all stood humanity. Not as conquerors or rulers, but as builders, partners, friends. They had been given a gift beyond measure. Not just technology, but time. Time to prove they were worthy of the stars. Time to show the galaxy what they could become. The Exodus Prime had protected them until they could protect themselves. Now it was their turn to carry that legacy forward. First speaker Chen Weilin returned to New Geneva and began her work. There were treaties to negotiate, disputes to resolve, 1,000 challenges waiting in the darkness. But she faced them all with hope, because she knew now what humanity was capable of. What the galaxy could become when fear gave way to trust. The ship that had made the galaxy flee was gone, but its inheritance would last forever.